fondly fondly known as MESSI. With a generous grant from Kakal, MESSI was launched on Tu B'Shvat this year to promote living sustainably and taking action to fight climate change within the conservative movement's institutions. And our first step was to enhance the conservative movement's partnership with Adama's Jewish Climate Leadership Coalition, which we're going to hear some about from Bruce today. This program supports synagogues in their efforts to create their own climate action plans. And to date, we're really proud to say that almost 70 congregations have registered for the coalition. MESSI also collaborated with rabbis and scholars to create a unique, beautiful set of weekly insights and teachings during the Omer that are about sustainability and that help enhance our celebration of the Omer. And you can find these at exploringjudaism.org. And now our Weeks of Learning and Doing webinar series is taking place, inspired by these same disciplines we're using in our weekly Omer teachings: learning, service, and loving kindness. The webinar series is highly curated, it's movement-wide, it's an online event for all, and we're offering education, information, and resources about environmental sustainability, Jewish perspective. We have more webinars coming, and the one we're listening to today, Climate Change and How Synagogues Respond, content will be starting momentarily. Just to also let you know that MESSI has partnered with various arms of the movement, and also some of our fabulous external partners like Adama, to offer this one-of-a-kind web series about the environment and climate change. And our hope is that it will inspire and motivate action and advocacy. And we hope it will inspire and motivate you to enhance your sustainability actions and commitment to protect the earth. Today's webinar is a conversation with information, research, and experiential stories about ways that synagogues can get involved, or have gotten involved, or could get involved in taking environmental action. So we'll hear from Bruce about Adama's work and the Jewish Climate Coalition, Jewish Climate Leadership Coalition. We're going to hear about some research results about synagogue sustainability and some examples of those that have been implemented from Diane, and how to create an internal infrastructure to support initiatives, and more from Jennifer. After the presenters speak, I'll briefly provide some really interesting results of a recent survey conducted by the Rabbinical Assembly's Social Justice Committee about synagogue environmental initiatives, and then we'll open up for questions. And lastly, a big thank you goes out to Adama for partnering with us and hosting this webinar. So now I'm excited to introduce today's speakers. First will be Bruce Spire. He works with Adama's climate action team as a program manager for the Jewish Climate Leadership Coalition, where he supports Jewish institutions to develop plans and integrate actions to address the climate crisis. Bruce is an amateur naturalist, a lover of composting, and a fermenter of food and drink. Prior to his work with Adama, Bruce worked as an environmental educator and horticulturalist with nonprofit and governmental organizations across New York City. Our second speaker is Diane Edelson. She's a 3-year veteran of the Environmental Committee at Agudath Israel Synagogue in Caldwell, New Jersey. Before retiring, she had a business in workforce development, working with other small businesses and helping with staffing and financial needs. Her organizational work included managing government contracts. In this role, she researched the types of government and foundational funding sources available for different kinds of projects. Diane helped lead the LED installation project at Agudath Israel, and she has supported the Environmental Committee in being integrated into the organizational infrastructure of the synagogue. And then we'll hear from Jennifer later. She's the president of Congregation B'Shalom in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, where she and her family joined in 2006 when her children were very young. And as you'll soon hear, Jennifer got her start at volunteering when she and her sons got involved in one of B'rith Shalom's early environmental initiatives. So welcome everyone, and let's get started. We'd love to hear from you first, Bruce.
Thank you, Shira. I'm very excited to be here. I'm just going to put up some slides that help keep me organized as I share a little bit about at least what we've seen at Adama and how synagogues are responding to the climate crisis. So I want to give you just a snapshot, at least from the perspective of how synagogues are responding within the context of the Jewish Climate Leadership Coalition. Uh, the Jewish Climate Leadership Coalition is a network of Jewish community organizations who recognize the existential threat and moral urgency of the climate change and commit to take action by filling out, submitting, and implementing climate action plans annually. This program was officially launched in the fall of 2022, and it now represents the largest collective effort of the Jewish community to take climate action. So today we have 333 organizations that have joined the coalition, representing all corners of Jewish life, JCCs, day schools, camps, synagogues, and 126 of those member organizations are synagogues. That means that synagogues represent the largest portion of membership and the largest collective Jewish effort on climate action. And I hope it's clear from at least my my tone and how I talk about this, that I personally find synagogues' responsiveness and kind of key role in this movement to be significant and important, and really inspiring. So I'm going to take a few minutes to share about the coalition. It'll be fairly high level just to give you an idea of what the program's like, so it has context on what synagogues are doing, and you can always learn more about it in a different venue. Yeah, so you can have a sense of what are these 126 synagogues doing. So the global climate crisis represents a historic inflection point for our planet, our communities, and our people, and Jewish tradition compels us to respond. This is the starting point for the coalition. And it's the idea that what we do today matters. Our actions today ripple forward in time, and it's our responsibility to collectively face this crisis with the full energy, resiliency, and resources of the Jewish community. So as I mentioned, the coalition was founded in 2022 by Adama with 20 major umbrella Jewish organizations who joined the coalition as founding partners. And this really demonstrated a broad consensus that the Jewish community was ready and capable of taking collective action. Since then, we've opened up the coalition and invited many people to join. We now have 133 members. The first round of climate action plans, which I'll talk more about later, were submitted this past January. And I love this logo, Cloud, because it just gives a glance at the breadth of the coalition as a movement and how synagogues are a part of this bigger movement. In the context of the conservative movement, we have two organizations in here, right? We have the Rabbinical Assembly, and then we have USCJ, and they're kind of right over there. So, right, two organizations that represent the role of the conservative movement in this, and we have actually every denomination represented in the coalition. So practically, there's only two main requirements for members that are in the coalition. So one is to designate a staff liaison to lead an individual organization's climate action work. So there's a person in every single membership synagogue. It's their job to make sure climate action is happening with our support. And the other is to fill out, submit, and implement an organizational climate action plan annually. Now, when I say climate action plans, they're plans that include the actions that you've taken to date, and you're then going to go set goals for reducing your synagogue greenhouse gas emissions in the coming year. I'll emphasize here that members don't need to generate a plan from scratch. We actually have an easy-to-use web form to help people who generate and submit a plan. And there are no minimum requirements for a climate action. And I want to highlight also that there's no cost to join the coalition, right? The goal is to make climate action as accessible and meaningful as possible to all Jewish institutions, and we try to reduce barriers to entry as much as possible. So when we talk about climate action plans, right, what do they actually look like? So the actions that all synagogues are taking are bucketed into two broad areas. And I should say not all synagogues are taking their kind of the options or the ways that different synagogues can see how climate action fits into their organizational plan. So one is, sorry, there we go. So we have two buckets. So one is getting to net zero greenhouse gas emissions, which is everything that your own operation is doing. And then the other is expanding impact, which I'll talk about in a second. So we've identified 4 solutions in this getting to net zero. So one is sourcing clean electricity. So either by purchasing clean electricity from the grid or producing your own solar. Going electric, electrifying your organization, then further reducing your emissions with a variety of different smaller projects. And then the last would be offsetting greenhouse gas emissions that you can't reduce with vetted carbon offsets. No one organization is taking on all of these, and no one organization, right? All these aren't necessarily a good fit. But the idea of the coalition is that we're actually supporting everyone to kind of take it one step at a time and get climate action planning on the agenda. Then the other side is expanding impact, right? That reducing our own impact alone won't get us to where we need to be. So there's some actions that you can take outside of what your organization does. So you can engage in education and nature connection, so programs and celebrations that ground us in our connection with the earth and inspire collective action, advocating for climate smart policy, and climate friendly finance, including choosing organizational investments, endowments, and banking relationships based on your climate impacts. So I'm going to go through this pretty quickly just to have a sense of like what are people doing throughout the year. So some of the ways that we work with organizations is we have resource guides and seminars and templates to write a climate action plan. We have a lot of staff support through office hours once a week, and also as well as check-ins. The one I really want to highlight is we have communities of practice. So there's a quarterly meeting that synagogues get to come together. It's one of my favorite programs of the year. We have an average of 40 attendees that come each quarter. And there's just so much energy and excitement generated from everyone in the room. There's this sense of shared purpose, mutual peer support, and hearing the collective impact really leaves me feeling uplifted for a number of days. And then the last is financial support. We offer interest-free loans and matching grants to help you with capital investments. So from a high level, right, what are the things that are working for synagogues that's getting them into action on the climate crisis? The first is joining the coalition. Participating in the Jewish climate movement itself is motivating and galvanizing. In our recent evaluation, we learned that 78% of coalition members felt that being part of the Jewish climate movement itself just helped them to take climate action. Just feeling like we're part of a bigger collective taking action together was hugely impactful. Filling out the climate action plan submission form reduces overwhelm, and it brings clarity on the next right steps. Instead of this open blue sky, I could do anything, where do I start? It really helps organize thoughts and acknowledge what work has been done and break things down into smaller bits. And again, in this evaluation, we found 74% of people felt that having a climate action plan to review and fill out was really important. And then 68% felt that just being accountable to creating this plan helped them go ahead and implement climate action. And focusing on actions and investments that save significant money, which are many climate action items. There's a myth that we really work on debunking, is that climate action is expensive, but it's actually inaction in the face of climate change that becomes expensive. Most of the capital investments you're going to make, like solar, electrification, various conversions like LED conversions, they're going to lead to significant long-term savings. And now more than ever, there are so many ways to finance those upfront costs, so you can actually go ahead and realize that. But changing the narrative in your different organizations about climate action and finance and savings is a huge part. And the last thing I'll note is just getting started where there's existing energy. And I could talk on this one point for hours. Environmentalists, including myself, we often fixate on individual behavior change, which takes a lot of energy, a lot of social capital. A classic example is an entire green team can focus all of their energy on getting the community to perfectly sort their kiddish waste into compost, recycling, and landfill, with varying success, with some people being annoyed, some people being burnt out. Whereas, let's say, identifying when your oil-fueled boiler is going to expire and then planning to replace it with an electric heat pump has a much larger, longer-lasting impact. It maybe requires a few people to get on the same page, and you don't have to worry about anyone changing their behavior in the long term. You just made a decision, had a few people, and you have a huge impact. So this is a very high-level overview. You can learn more at our website, adama.org/coalition. I'm really excited to share more later on, and we do offer deeper dive info sessions as well. And I do have some case studies that we could dive into later if there's questions about that and how this is played out with some of the synagogues. So with that, thank you very much, and I'll pass it back to you, Shira.
Great. Thank you, Bruce. That was really fantastic. And just to say that I've been working with Adama directly to help our synagogues get on board, and it's a really fantastic program. Okay, next we'll hear from Diane.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Bruce, for that presentation. It's a good segue into what I'm going to speak about. Of course, Shira Siegel, thank you for inviting me to participate today in this webinar. So I'm Diane Edelson from Agudath Israel in Caldwell, New Jersey, and I'm a member of our environmental committee. Just a little bit about our history. The environmental committee has been a part of Agudath culture for quite some time. In fact, Rabbi Silverstein, who was our rabbi for about 40 years and recently retired a few years back, started the committee and kind of gave it a mission statement, which I like to read because I think it says a lot of what we believe in. The committee, the environmental committee, is to educate the Agudath Israel community on caring for the environment, grounded in Jewish teachings that lead to action that lessens our negative impact on the environment. I think that says a lot about, what we're trying to achieve, about putting together our values of sustaining this planet, our Jewish values, and helping create less impact negatively on the community. So the committee has evolved over time, and in 2017, it was chaired and started to be chaired by, who still is today, Harriet Seppenwall, who is a member of the congregation. And from that period on, we have been meeting regularly. For those of you who may know Harriet, she's a very persistent individual, and she's gotten about 30 members of our congregation to be active members, and I'm one of them. And she engaged me a good deal because she thought I'd be interested. She got me so involved in coming to the meetings that I even took some classes on environmental science. So I've got into it. I see, of course, the value and the importance of getting involved. And some of the accomplishments that just to give you an idea of what the synagogue has accomplished in the last couple of years, some really important things. First, of course, I'll mention our Adama membership, and we've received the Hazon Award for sustainability. We have put together 2 B'Shvat Seders, environmental Shabbats. We've engaged some of our clergy too, because Rabbi Sarah Blumenthal, who's involved with the Rabbinical Assembly, she's spoken to the congregation about the teachings of conservative Judaism about the environment. She's spoken at our environmental Shabbat, which we have each year. So another one of our accomplishments. We've started to do more recycling, more of a vegetarian options at our Kiddush. We put together a vegetarian cookbook, which we printed out and sold. So we've done quite a few different things, and also had some notable speakers come to our quarterly meetings and speak. We had Jonathan Saffron Farr, who was a well-known environmentalist, on helping the environment by what you eat, and spoke about that. We've had a speaker from Adama, the organization in Israel that helps on environmental issues and collaborates with the surrounding countries, as well as Israel and the United States, which is remarkable considering all the challenges of that region. And so we've had some very interesting speakers and so forth. So the question then came last summer was, where do we go from here? We are an accepted part of our congregational organization. We meet regularly. What more can we do? And I made the suggestion, what are other synagogues doing? I'd like to know what is happening out there. And I thought at first calling some of the local people, but then one of our members said, let's contact Adama. They know where there are committees in different synagogues. And so Adama sent us a list of about 25 congregations where there are committees and where people are actively involved, and gave me the name of the committee members and the committee chairs, and I sent out emails. And I got responses from several, and I reached out and called and had several conversations. And I learned, quite a few things of what they're doing. So let me just give you some ideas, from Baltimore, Maryland, to White Plains, New York, to Redwood City, California, to Merrick, Long Island. People are heavily involved, plus more in locations across the US. So some things that they're doing, I learned about community gardens, growing vegetables for their day schools. I learned about congregations that are involved in campaigns for environmental human rights. One congregation writes a green guide for bar and bat mitzvah projects, contributes to organizations for recycling of clothing and household items. Others belong to climate advocacy groups. One set up a resilience center to help the power outages in their community. And then others, one had a habitat for honeybees and butterflies and was part of the National Wildlife Association. Those are some of the things that they were doing and are somewhat similar to what we were doing. But what came out of these conversations was 4 areas that people are focused on that have to do with structural changes to the actual buildings of the synagogues. Those 4 are changing to LED lighting, upgrading your HVAC systems, installing solar panels, and replacing gas-powered appliances with thermal pump systems. So that got me thinking and got me researching what are some of these issues, because these would bring the work of our committee to a different level. And of course, all these projects involve that big magic word, money. And then you have to get board approval, and then you have to get buy-in from the leadership in the synagogue and so forth. However, since I said our leader is very persevering and we're a very persevering community, we thought about what we could do. And one of the organizations I spoke with, one of the synagogues, the woman there worked for an organization that would do an analysis on a building, on a synagogue building, to see where there were needs. And they came down actually and did an analysis. And one of the things they suggested to us was that we don't have internal LED lighting. We actually have outside LED lighting. We don't have inside. We have outside that was financed by the Department of Homeland Security, but because of security reasons, but the inside didn't include that. We don't have that. We have an upgraded HVAC system. We have some limitations of what we could do with solar panels, and the thermal pump systems for the electric appliances was something to consider, but put on hold. The focus seemed to move in the direction of, let's see what we can do with the LED lighting. So we had a meeting with our president, who was on board, and we had a meeting with the person in our synagogue who volunteers, but really is the facilities maintenance person, who concurred that the LED lighting could be replaced. But how do we go get the money for that? So I took the initiative to do some of the research on this, and we came up with 3 sources of funding, which I think is valuable because it can be a basis for other organizations as well. So one is public utilities in the area will often give you a grant. We were able to secure a $25,000 grant from PSC&G. I should mention that the job to change the lighting is about $120,000. The public utilities is willing to offer us a grant. Adama, as Bruce mentioned, helps financially at times, and they had put out an RFP, a request for proposal, which we answered, and we were awarded about $8,000 towards this project. So what to do about the rest of the money? I then learned from conversations I had with some of these people I had spoken to at different synagogues, as well as with the public utility, that they can offer a no-interest loan, which takes quite a bit of paperwork to complete, but we continued to persevere. And finally, we were able to connect, get the loan, and put this together and start this project. Let me just mention something about the fact that financially, the cost of electricity is reduced by half by installing LED lighting. So the cost of paying back this loan, which would be equivalent to what the full cost of electricity is at the synagogue, would then save the saving of the money using the LED lighting while we're paying off the loan would not exceed the current electricity and power bill. Once the loan is paid off, then the synagogue has half the utility bill it had before for electricity and can use that money for other programs. Just to give you an idea on numbers, the shul pays about $6,000 a month on utilities. Of course, some of that's heat and air conditioning, but a good part of that is electricity. The synagogue is open and busy all day long from morning through evening. A lot of electricity is used. So there is considerable cost savings that can be implemented here for other programming by implementing the LED lighting. And of course, we become a more sustainable organization within the community. And hopefully the board will be open again to other projects we might implement, because we see some possibilities for solar panels and some possibility for upgrading our gas-powered appliances. So that is our story, how we got to this point. But I think it's a good model for other synagogues who are interested to learn about the different funding options that might be out there, of which there are quite a few, and ways in which we went about this. So thank you. I hope that was helpful to understand how our committee has grown from where it started from a mission statement to an active community as part of the infrastructure of the synagogue, to recognized by the clergy and the lay community who are leaders in our synagogue and our board, and some of the projects we've worked on, the speakers we've had, and then increasing our sustainability through our infrastructure change.
It's
Okay,
really
thank you.
fantastic.
Thank you.
you, Diane. You have a really special congregation, and you have really incredible leadership and a lot of energy and motivation and good intention
Right.
on the side of the lay people, including yourself. And that
Yes.
showcases what can really be done when you have the alignment, especially if you have the wherewithal to do the investigative research around the grants element. So well done, Kol HaKavod. Thank you for
Thank you.
sharing. And I think that that's a great example of kind of going big, and that's not necessarily the right thing for all congregations, but I hope
Right.
it serves some as inspiration for those who are looking to,
Mhm.
really step things up.
Mhm.
Thank you, Jennifer. We're
Okay.
looking forward to hearing from you.
Yes. So this is going to be kind of the opposite of going big, but I feel good about what our path has been so far. And I've been taking notes from Bruce and Diane. So thank you. And thank you, Shira, for having me here today. So I'm, as she mentioned, president of Congregation Bris Shalom. We're located in Bethlehem in Eastern Pennsylvania. We have a congregation of 158 member units, either singles, families, or whatever. And we're actually celebrating our centennial this year. So it's a big year for us, and being part of this webinar is just another great part of it. We can it's a great time to be reflecting back, in other words, on what we've been doing and where we're going. So I thought I would tell you about a few of the initiatives that we've had here. A lot of this has gotten started after our current rabbi arrived, which was about 11 years ago. And one of the things that he got us involved in was, it's called Monocacy Farm. So it's here in town, and it's an initiative started at a convent. They have an organic garden. And we were invited or got into partnership with them, along with other organizations, to do this organic farming and then give away the produce to food banks. So if I could share my screen, do I have the capability to do that, Shira? I'll just share a photo from, here we are. This was about, this was quite a few years ago now. The two, they're all graduating from college now. But, so this was probably 8 or 10 years ago that we were working on the farm. As you can see, we would pick green beans, we would chop a lot of weeds, we would water or trim kale or just all kinds of things. It was great because it was a very active way to be involved in helping the earth and helping people access organic foods. We also had a connection to Jewish Family Service in the next town over, which is Allentown. So a part of the produce that was raised at the farm was shipped over to JFS, where they have a food bank, and they still have that food bank, of course, and people can come in that way and get fresh produce, which is really amazing. That, of course, is something that's expensive in grocery stores, and especially if you're talking about organic. So that felt like a really great thing to do. It was also fun for us as a family to work on it. I will say that not a lot of families worked on it, not a lot of individuals. It didn't feel like it was in the wheelhouse for everybody to get out there and do the manual labor, even though some of the jobs were not that labor intensive, like washing produce at a sink, which was at a normal height. So it wouldn't have been hard for people to do, or a lot of people to do, but it was still, maybe it wasn't just something they were familiar with. My youngest son chose working with JFS as his bar mitzvah project. So he was actually able to go and interview people who run the food bank and see how the food bank operates. And we made donations to the food pantry there and that kind of thing. So this was something that was very integrated into other aspects of what was happening, not only for our family, but in the community at large. It also was a great way for us to build bridges with other organizations in the city. As I mentioned, the convent where this is located and other people who are involved. And we're still involved with this organic garden, although my family is not directly involved right now. But I would like to be again. So it is still there and that's still possible. So that was most active when it was first getting started. I think we worked there 3 summers in a row. It coincides with the kids needing community service hours for high school too. So, there's a lot of things that could be done where if it's involving hands-on activity, they could get credit, they get incentive, and it also helps them with something they need to do anyway. Another thing that we have done more recently is looking into changing the light bulbs to LED, as Diane mentioned, and then solar. So it's a little hard to believe, but it sounds like our property is a little bit small for the solar. We do have a whole lower parking lot, so I still haven't given up on that idea. I'm thinking there must be something that we could do. But for now, that one's not active. Some of the LED light bulbs were changed. It was not a $120,000 project for us. A kind of interesting piece of that is that the perpetual, the light above the ark that's on all the time, I'm blanking on the word for it right now, but the eternal flame was changed out for an LED light. But it's a cool light. It's like a bluish color. I mean, it's still it's a light bulb, but some are warmer colors, like a golden glow, and some are cooler. And the one that's in there happens to be cooler. So a couple of people in the congregation they're artists, they're looking at these kinds of things. I hadn't really thought about it myself, but they said it's like a bluish light. We really need like a golden glowing light. So we're looking into making that switch. So it's one of those things that, you kind of like take 2 steps forward, 1 step back, but you keep going. And that's what we have tried to do over the years. This is another interesting thing. So Shira had mentioned, or I'd somehow heard about the idea of vegetarian kiddishes, like no meat kiddishes, which we do have. But as I said to Shira, that's just because that's what they are. That's just like what they always are. So it's it's great, you know, and I think it does matter when you find out, hey, we were already doing something right or great to begin with. Yay, no extra effort. And I love what Bruce said about like going where there's already energy. Now, I would love to see us do more things with intention. So that's definitely an area that I would look towards. And I have been seeing that actually in our planning our centennial events. So as I mentioned, this is 100 years for us. So we have 5 events ranging from January 1st to December 31st. We have a committee of people who are planning for those. And one of the things that we talk about for every event is the utensils and the plates. So are we going to, we have a full set of, you know, of plates, ceramic plates and silverware and all that kind of thing. But we always have this discussion, like, are we going to use those or are we going to use disposable? And it's a little bit, it's something you have to navigate because it's not as simple as, oh, well, we've got the ceramic, let's just use it. Because you also have to think about staff, how they're going to feel, you know, cleaning up after, you know, 150 people have dined, and whether they can even support that, whether we have the staff that's even going to be available. We're a small operation. We have, most of the time, we have 2 part-time custodians. So there's not a lot of support in terms of doing something big that requires more labor, where you're going to have to add laborers to do that. So, but what I love is it's become part of the conversation. And I would like to see a lot more of that and encourage a lot more of that. And in fact, I see on this call Rabbi Nina Beth Carden, and who visited here. And one of the things that I would love to be able to do is have a position on the board that's specifically bringing environmental into the conversation and raising everyone's awareness about that. You know, I think it is a process. We have a very small staff. So it mostly depends on volunteer-led activity. So is there somebody out there who cares about the environment and wants to get involved? Probably. But we have to think about the side of finding the person, recruiting the person, and making sure they feel supported and really can get started on this. There's plenty of projects during my time as president where I've thought, oh, that'd be such a great idea. I find somebody who's interested in doing it, but if I don't follow up, it might not happen. So, you know, I'm kind of learning as I'm going along and seeing what we need to do in terms of the infrastructure to support these good things that we want to do. Like, we haven't signed up for the coalition yet because I do want to make sure that we have a person in place who's going to carry that forward. So it's an interesting thing in a small congregation to try to navigate, as you can see, a lot of, in some ways, competing, let's say, priorities or demands that we have to be careful about, basically, but always moving in a positive direction, hopefully. And I'll pause there.
Can I make one comment, if I may?
Sure.
It's interesting listening to you. I should have said that Agudath Israel is a congregation of 850 members. So, and yours 150. So of course it's a different needs and different system, of course. We're part of the greater Metro West community here. So it puts us in a little different place. But I don't want to make it sound like we had it all easy. We had a lot of pull and push too. We had to sell a lot of this too. We had a lot of, oh, that's not important and we're not going to do this, or we're not going to spend that money, or we're not going to get involved in this, and we don't need vegetarian food at the Kiddush, or compostable, disposable, properly disposable cutlery and so forth. We've had a lot of pull and push on it too. So you're not the only one. You're not alone with that.
Yeah, I mean, and I think actually at our congregation, I think it's actually an easy sell, but it's taking it from there. And making sure that, you know, we have, whether we can support it by people showing up, as with the farm, or by being able to support it kind of on the back end with our staff. There's considerations. And I think it goes best when you do take those things into consideration so that it can be successful. Whatever does happen can be in a growth direction instead of kind of like a start and stop kind of thing. I think to me, it feels like it's been a continuous thing moving in the right direction. I think, is there more that we could do to, turbocharge that? Definitely. And I would like to be doing this. And by the way, shout out to Agudath Israel, because my husband was a bar mitzvah there.
Oh, wow, that's
Yes.
great.
That was really interesting. Thank you for sharing about that, Jennifer. And one of the reasons we wanted to have both Diane and Jennifer on was to have this contrast to represent that you have all different sizes of synagogue communities with all different levels of capacity and capability, and that no matter what, there is some opportunity there for congregations to take some action. And I think a common thread is ensuring that there's the right person to be the one to ensure that that's a priority, and get all the buy-in, and continue the advocacy. So it's really interesting to hear these two scenarios side by side. And I think it would be also interesting for me to add, sort of right at this point in the conversation, about Diane talked about the research that she did. There was actually a survey done by the Rabbinical Assembly Social Justice Committee about synagogue environmental initiatives, because they were really looking to understand what they could do to be supportive of these initiatives, and what they could do to be available. And so the results were the survey was sent to all of the conservative synagogue member congregations and to all of the Rabbinical Assembly rabbis. And the impetus was to kind of understand what is actually going on and what the Social Justice Committee could offer. And so, kind of in parallel to what both of you said, the main takeaways were that the congregations really wanted some kind of turnkey project ideas, and some like kind of ready-made resources, but that also there was this barrier to entry with environmental and sustainability work around money, and kind of as a sidebar, leadership, that there were people who are interested, but they feel very limited when it comes to accessing funds. And I can say in my work with the Jewish Leadership Climate Coalition, that I said it backwards again, with the coalition, Adama's coalition, we'll just shorten it, that a lot of the barriers to entry are indeed congregations thinking that they need to go big or do nothing. And so we see that there are a lot of different types of opportunities that people can take advantage of. And yeah, as long as there's leadership and buy-in as well. That's, I'm sure, something that all congregations are coming up against. Yeah. So we'll open the floor to anybody who has any questions or comments that they want to share about the presentation so far. And Bruce, you're receiving those, right? Okay, no questions yet. Okay, so I have some questions prepared that I'm going to ask our panelists, who really gave fantastic presentations, super interesting. So one of my questions for you, Bruce, would be, what would you say you have learned about this sort of a barrier to entry of electing liaisons to lead the coalition? Because we talked about how it's important to have somebody driving that train, and for the coalition, there is a kind of a requested requirement that there be a liaison who will be in charge.
Yeah. The leadership question, I would say it's not unique to synagogues, but it's definitely a special question for synagogues because we have such interesting leadership. The liaison, we say it's very much a leadership role because you're holding climate action, right? Like you're kind of holding it's like I'm the one that's gonna be coordinating. I'm in relationship with the coalition and others, that you can absolutely bring other people in, but you don't have to be the one that signs all of the approvals, right? You don't even have to be on the board. Um, so I think there's kind of two directions. One is the only person you actually need to approve to join is your rabbi or synagogue president, just to sign on and register. Then after that, there's a lot of benefit to having a liaison just to get it and keep it on the agenda, right? By interacting with other synagogues, by interactive resources, just by writing out a climate action plan, it starts putting it on the agenda. Actually, a lot of the spirit of what you were saying, Jennifer, is kind of a lot of what we're hoping to accomplish. Just create small actions, whatever's within your capacity. And not every synagogue is going to have a large green team. In fact, we tried to design the program so you don't need to have a large green team. If you have one, great. But if not, we also try to design it so you could have someone, kind of behind the curtain pulling levers and having, maximum impact that way. The last thing I'll say is the actual requirement, the reporting requirement is filling out and submitting a climate action plan. Which itself is a thorough document, but it's not a hard document to complete, right? It's something that takes understanding what's going on and creating a plan and then doing your best to implement it. But there's no penalties, right? We're trying to follow up and hold everyone accountable so we could check in on our goals and be supported to move forward. So it's a real challenge, and I think it's a balance between, is there someone who's ready to do the work? And do I have enough buy-in to get started so it gets on the agenda?
Yeah. Yep. We actually have a comment that the chat was disabled, and I actually received we have Rebecca has a question. Let's see.
Hi. Yes, the chat is disabled.
Okay, we're gonna fix it. Thank you.
Oh,
May I say my question?
Please.
Okay. Excuse me, I'm chewing. So I'm with Rodef Shalom Temple, very small synagogue in Newport News, Virginia. And actually I found a liaison today who's going to head up the coalition and fill that out. And he was a little weary, and I said, there's nothing to lose. We've already done, so much. Adama is going to be giving us resources, as you stated. I'm glad to hear that it's a web form. We also, like Jennifer, we started with utensils actually, and we're vegetarian just because we only have a milk kitchen, a dairy kitchen. But my question is, I know we can reach out to y'all at any time, but is there a forum, a Facebook group, a LinkedIn group, a community where we can ask each other directly versus emails versus going through y'all?
I'm assuming the y'all in this situation is Adama. So that's a great question. Right now, that forum is the community of practice. So that we come together quarterly and we do maintain a contact list. I would say in the exact way you're describing, we don't have that set up. We have thought about it and exploring different ways because we're trying to figure out the best ways to kind of point people and connect people to each other. I would say, yes, we are looking for that. And we have experimented with Facebook groups with other programs in the past, and they have been wildly underutilized, which is one of the reasons why we haven't. But that doesn't mean we can't try that out and implement it again. I would say hearing Diane pick up the contact list and make a lot of phone calls and get connected to people was really exciting because I never actually hear about people using it. So it was super exciting to hear you use that resource.
Oh, great.
Great. I did receive a message, and I think it's directed at you, Bruce. The question was, how do we respond, or how do you respond to congregations saying, sustainability is great, but we have much higher priorities, especially now?
Great question. I have that in two answers. I answer that one way for people that have joined the coalition, which say that's actually exactly it, right? It's no one's primary mission to address the climate crisis. and it's urgent, right? Like both of those things are there, and that's why we're really focused on planning to keep it on the agenda, meet you where you're at, and support incremental action so it doesn't fall off the agenda. That's one answer. The other answer is the coalition might not be a good fit for you right now. Right. So a lot of what you were talking about, Shira, and kind of everyone, is the willingness and wanting to engage with the work is really, really important. We have a ton of resources for people that are like for organizations that are ready to jump in and want to do the work. The only other thing I would say is climate action saves money. Like it's just the smart, fiscally responsible way to go. Whether it's reducing your food costs because you're going vegetarian, or Diane painted the best picture I could have about how converting to LEDs or other technologies are going to save you money in the long run. So those are kind of a few ways I might respond to that.
Well, if I could add here, although yes, we did finance that project, we do not have an active budget from the synagogue. We operate without one. Everybody volunteers their time. The speakers are speakers at no cost, and the projects we do are basically at our own expense and so forth. So it's not like we have a lot of resources, but like you said, we're committed to the process. We're committed to this matter, and we want to show success with it. We want to engage with it. That's the most important thing. It's not about necessarily having resources. And yes, like Jennifer pointed out, you've got to work with your people, and that's always a challenge too. But Adama has been a very big support for that too. I would thank you for that, for what you offer and for conversations that we've had together. So I think that it was great, just like the list that I used that came straight from you guys.
And we have a comment also from a participant viewer that shout out to Adama. We are a small congregation, Temple Judea of Laguna Hills, California, that has received a grant for rooftop solar panels that are currently on our roof, and the contractor is finishing up connecting to the electric grid, expected to save $2.5 million over the life of the project.
Okay, very
Wow.
good. That's great.
There you go. Case study. Great.
One thing on that note, solar in particular, one of our partners has been saying solar's on sale. I won't go as far to say that solar will work in every situation, but often there's ways to make it work. Kind of like what you were expressing, Jennifer. Like, man, if we could just find the way. Whenever you do feel like you can join, I would love to workshop that and find the way, because there's just never been more barriers just knocked down by the government, by us. We've raised a climate action fund. It's very exciting. Exactly like what Rabbi Dennis shared, like we were able to support that out in Southern California.
Yeah, I'm hopeful that we can get somebody on board for this role soon. I mean, if we don't, and you're talking about like just fill out the form, send it in, but if we don't connect it with a volunteer, it becomes, so we have to make sure. I've learned in the past year, just make sure there's a lay leader from the start. Otherwise, it just doesn't, it's not successful because one person can't do, everything. So it has to be split out.
I hope I didn't oversell the simplicity. Actually, I think you're saying something very important, Jennifer, is that it is a leadership role. It's
Right.
very much a leadership role. It's one of the reasons why we require it, because it'll actually set you up for success. So I didn't mean to.
No, I would love for us to be able to do more, and I believe we will.
I agree it will happen, especially with your leadership. And I think one thing that may be worth spending like 30 seconds on is, Jennifer, when you and I initially spoke about this webinar, you mentioned to me about how you would implement your environmental leader into the infrastructure of your organization. Can you talk just really, really briefly about that?
In terms of right. Okay. So here's what I've been thinking about doing. And, it's an evolving thing, but we have a lot of committees. I mean, we have, and it's good. We have actually a high number of volunteers at our congregation. And that's something that a lot of people notice about us. What I'm hoping that we can do is have an environmental committee with the coalition connection liaison being one part of that committee. So, and like I said before, I'd love to have that person have the environmental chair on the board. And I also love what Diane said about having 30 people. Yeah, why think of it as a traditional committee with 6 people who are meeting once a month or something like that, and maybe make it more like a network or something in that direction.
Beautiful. And I think the other thing you mentioned when we first spoke was to potentially create kind of like a job description for this.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah,
or
that's
even-
what we're doing for all of our roles.
which
Yeah.
I really like as a form of empowerment for the individual or individuals, as it may be, you know?
Right. Yeah, it sets expectations and helps people know what to stay focused on. I actually wrote my own job description a couple months ago, so we're doing that for everybody.
I think that's a really powerful way to maintain the buy-in, and it shows people that you're really serious, you know, this isn't, you're agreeing to this is because you really want to be a part of it and have a role that makes a difference. So I think it's great.
Yeah, and it's easier. It's
Mhm.
good for recruiting also, because then you can be specific, like this is what it would, be, this is what we're hoping for,
Absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree. We have 2 minutes left, so if there's no other questions, I'm going to do the outro. Which is to say we've gotten to the end of a very interesting hour. I want to offer a huge thanks to Bruce from Adama, Diane from Agudath Israel, Jennifer from Bris Shalom for taking the time today to share with us about the work that you're doing around environmental action and sustainability initiatives. It's been super interesting. I'm really grateful that I got to moderate this conversation, and I'm thankful for all of your contributions. I hope all of you in the audience were able to get a glimpse into the different, a small glimpse into the many different options for taking action and feeling encouraged to start, keep going, or even level up in your sustainability projects. Bruce put the link for signing up for the coalition into the chat box. I'm going to put the link for signing up for the rest of our webinar series in the chat box as well. We have 7 more incredible webinars coming up, including titles such as capital planning from an environmental perspective, helping to ensure a healthy world, the mitzvah of Yishuv HaOlam, and cultivating spiritual courage and confronting the climate crisis. Feel free to take a look at that registration page, which has all the titles and the descriptions for all of the webinars. We're so grateful to have been partnering with Adama and being sponsored by Kakal to put forth all of these beautiful webinars that are environmentally focused and Judaism infused. So I'm thanking you all so much for your participation and your contributions, and the end. Thank you all so much. Snaps all around.